Meeting is in session. Thank you, everybody, for coming. We are going to try to keep this meeting brief. I have a family thing to get back to that suddenly came up just minutes before this meeting. You can't hear me? I'm trying not to. All right, any better?
That's much better.
All right, we're going to try to keep this meeting brief. I have a family matter I have to get back to. Came up just before Dennis and I arrived, so I want to try to speed along. Also, just a couple things to mention. I want to give accolades out to everybody who helped on the 4th of July. It really was a terrific event and well attended. I think I saw more people than I've seen in a number of years. It was great. So my thanks to the Garrett Park Citizens Association and all volunteers who stepped up to help out. It was really terrific. I also wanted to mention that I just come back, Andrea, myself, and Phil Schulp. Phil Schulp and Jane McClintock are not here this evening on council. They have other issues, so they are not here. But Phil, Andrea, and I attended the Maryland Municipal League conference a week and a half ago. It was a great learning venue, a lot of best practices, a lot of great networking. Just a few things to quickly list that some things we might be able to mull on as a council and as a town. There was the smartphone alert system that we found very relevant and practical, even in cost, something to think about. We learned more about the smart parking meter and enforcement, also very practical and cost efficient. You might be surprised. We had learned some best practices on budget, which included the trend analysis and a certain percentage of dollars in reserve. I won't go into specifics, and also managing at the macro level. I myself attended a efficient meetings presentation, and with underscoring time, okay? Also a parking lot, as we've already implemented, and also materials for the public, to get more public engagement and input. So that was a takeaway from there. I went to a small town issues meeting, not surprising. Two big things that are already being talked about here in town, the small cell tower issue coming up, and stormwater. Learned that I'll rephrase that many of the municipalities in the state of Maryland already charge a stormwater fee. It's not a tax, it's a fee for amount of the non-permeable surface. Interesting idea. A third topic that was a very big concern for most of the western counties, it seemed to me, was the opioid addiction and fatalities. Those were some of the things we took back from the Maryland Municipal League. It was great. And as you know, we will be talking about some stormwater tonight. Hans will lead that. And that's all I will have to say at this point. I would like, we have approval of agenda, minutes, and then we have presentations. So let's get to it. Approval of agenda.
Thought it looks fine to me.
Shall we take anything off? We have a couple members not here.
Well, let's take the reading plan off and the archives off, and the traffic and parking off.
Is that all fine by everybody?
Yep.
Okay, we'll do that. Otherwise, we're all in favor of the agenda with those changes?
Yep.
Okay. Okay, next, presentation, approval of minutes from June 10th. Is it June 10th? Any changes to the minutes?
None would be
All right.
From my side, I did the full review, sent any thoughts I had.
Yep.
No changes for me.
We good?
No change. We did some changes by emails, but it worked pretty good.
That was great, thank you.
Okay. All right, so minutes are approved?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, unanimous, thank you. All right, presentations by residents, and I see some, Mr. George Martin, if you wouldn't mind keeping your remarks to 3 minutes, we'll all try that, okay? Is that working? You can take it off the stand?
It's on.
Is it fine? Okay. A very quick comment about the meeting June 10th. Just to correct what Ed had on it about George Martin. This was the older George Martin. That's referring to me. I am the oldest George Martin because my son George sitting there is George J. Martin, and his son is George Che Martin. So for the record, Ed, I am the oldest George Martin.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you for clarifying.
For this 3 minutes, so, and if you missed anything, I'm going to give you all a copy of my presentation. Okay. When I brought to CACI's attention just a month ago a new problem I have with SHA, I was delighted how, with Gene Horan and Cindy Kratz' help, they would grab hold of the task to alert the whole vicinity of SHA's intent to abandon their master plan of 2002. Once they stopped flooding our Holy Cross property, in essence, once the storm water piping was installed, State Highway Administration would simply place sod and walk away with no planning and no sidewalks. And I forgot to mention, I'm George Martin, 4513 Oxford Street, and I'm representing Holy Cross Parish. Having been in the trenches fighting State Highway Administration for 7 years and having finally forced them to install a stormwater system to stop the flooding of the Holy Cross property, I want to give you some insight into what you are up against in making them revisit their own plan of 2002. One, there seems to be an iron curtain between the State Highway Administration Greenbelt office and higher authority. Despite having contacted numerous state representatives as to our flooding plight, I was amazed to see how the Greenbelt office appeared immune from any pressure, even though the Holy Cross school children were put at risk every time flooding occurred. This is a picture of it, and you will all have a copy in a minute of what it looks like. You can see my back is to the school. We're looking out at Strathmore, and all of you will have a copy of this in a minute. This pond at this point is probably 12, 13, 14 feet high.
Oh, he's not, okay.
12 or 13 feet high?
13 feet high, 13,
Wow.
14 feet high.
What's that?
Deep?
From the trench, from the inlet pipe to the flooded area high above the road is roughly 12, 13 feet high. State Highway Administration Greenbelt office is apparently very budget limited. That is, if they can do it on the cheap, it may get done, and you will likely have to fight for every buck. Since State Highway Administration is using federal funds on your Safe Route program, it is a kinder, gentler State Highway Administration to deal with. That is, your town, you're lucky. You're dealing with them without their money. They're dealing with federal funds and not their own money. As a former commercial contractor, I've never run into a government in-house contracting entity wherein both the agency and the contractor are one and the same. Typically, the plans I have here would have gone out to public for bidding, and the lowest responsible bidder would be awarded the contract. It is my belief that this in-house method of contracting lightly explains why the project has come to a standstill and is likely to contribute to a school opening traffic problem soon. I believe that had the engineering been performed anticipating going out to bid to the public, proper due diligence would have uncovered the utility conflicts presently causing State Highway Administration delay. They're stopped right now because they have a utility conflict issue. As you can picture, stormwater piping is gravity defined. And so there's nothing they can do with their invert for their pipe, so it looks like the other utilities will have to accommodate the stormwater system. The plans I'm referring to are these plans. These are their miniatures, but these are the plans that had they been blown up and been and due diligence properly and reviewed these plans, you probably would not have the delay, the utility problem, the conflicts that State Highway Administration is now experiencing. When this will be resolved, I have no idea. I'll keep you tuned. I've got emails to them trying to get an answer, but in the meantime, you're just seeing equipment sitting there idle. The reason I believe the Strathmore is a forgotten road is that State Highway Administration dreams for 4 lanes stopped at the town of Garrett Park. Therefore, that 1 mile stretch of road isn't worth the time to fool with, and sidewalks are incidental to State Highway Administration's interests. Unless we keep up the public and political pressure, I believe it may not be done before 2030. That's 10, 11 years from now. Again, if it's been 17 years to this point that they had the 2002 plan, why would I not think it's going to take another 10, 11 years to get a sidewalk in and the planning that we want? I have asked Byrne Kelly, sitting here, the landscape architect who will be sending to the town his proposal this week for controlling the nursery school runoff to Holy Cross, simply to attend to see the town council in operation. Byrne hopes he can use an existing grant program to resolve this issue. Byrne informed me that when he did the controlled storm water runoff for the nursery school about 8 years ago, it was done as a demonstration project. Again, hopefully, this proposal, he'll be looking into the possibility of making use of an existing grant program. So this is a relatively minor issue, and I'm going on to bigger things. But my focus tonight is not a nursery school runoff to Holy Cross, or to speculate on the efforts of State Highway Administration present hold-up dilemma. I am asking the council to think big. It has been 17 years since we should have had a bike lane and a sidewalk on Strathmore. Given the speed with which State Highway Administration has operated in the past 7 years, the recent sudden burst of support from the community will not have any effect unless we both continue to press the political buttons necessary and to bring to the table a carrot they may bite on.
That was your notice.
I'm not finished. You'll see what they're going to bite on. All State Highway Administration capital programs need 1, scope of work, and 2, money. We have in hand the 2002 scope of work, but where is the money? That is where the town has got to think outside the box. While our political hell-raising may cut my projected 10 years in half while waiting on the money, why not offer your present sidewalk grant to try to get it done? As to safety, there is no contest between the town or Strathmore sidewalks as to what is more critical. That's my
Okay,
presentation.
thank you, George.
By the way, here's the, anybody look at it or check it out? This is the 2002 plan.
Yeah, we'd like a copy of it. Does anybody on the council have any questions or comments? I do, but I'll save them until I hear from any of you.
I guess it would be good to get that report if we can get a copy of it and then distribute it amongst the council.
This report, the
Yeah.
2002.
2002, yeah.
I think there was another plan that was done in about, I think there was another plan that was done about 6 years ago where they were going to improve the stretch all the way to Strathmore, all the way to Rockville Pike.
Right, that's true. Earlier,
No, later.
well, earlier
about
too, in the
6 or 7 years
mid-90s,
ago.
yeah.
And they proposed to rebuild Strathmore all the way to Rockville Pike.
That's
And-
correct.
And they've done part of it, but they've never really done the whole project.
That's
And that
right.
included a sidewalk.
Yeah, the 2002
On-
also
the
shows it
Sidewalk on
from,
the south side.
right. By the way, it shows the north and south side sidewalks too.
Go
In
ahead, George.
any case, the 2002 program is from Town of Garrett Park to Rockville Pike. I didn't mean to say that it was just from Town of Garrett Park to Holy Cross Academy. The plan was a full rehabilitation of Strathmore from town to, and I was involved in it back in the 90s when they were looking, and we were at speech and hearing on.
Right. Could I ask Hans, you said that you thought there was one just 6 or 7 years ago? You said there was a more recent plan than 2002? And if
Yeah,
so,
yeah, I
we'd
think
love
so,
to
but-
get our hands on that.
Well, I don't know, I never saw a report, I just heard discussions from SHA that they were planning to do that. And
Okay.
they did a little bit, they fixed the entrance, if you're coming off Rockwell Pike and heading.
Exactly.
They fixed
In
the
fact,
entrance
that's
there,
the
and they
point.
added the lane,
sorry.
and then subsequently they've made those lane
That,
adjustments.
Right.
that was part of the 2002 actual plan in there. They actually talk about that.
I understand, but I mean,
Yeah.
that's,
That was the only
Okay.
part of the 2002
Right.
program was done,
Right.
a exiting lane
That was
to going
phase
north
one.
on Rockwell Pike.
Yeah, that was phase one. I read the report, the 2002 report, I'm sorry, so I kind of have more
Yeah.
detail in my head.
Question. So I just want to make sure I get the nutshell here. So in addition to what you shared with us the last meeting, which was, what I took away is push for the sidewalk, you're adding to that push for the bike lane, and you're saying
Yep.
keep up the pressure.
Well, the
Just
bike lane,
nutshell.
the bike lane and the sidewalk are part of 2002. My presentation in June was primarily about the nursery school runoff, and that's what Vern's going to be dealing with and sending you a proposal on this week. That was what it was primarily about. But since
Yeah.
then, CACI really jumped into the fray and has really gotten everybody involved in the sidewalk. But the sidewalk project includes bike lanes, it also includes bike lanes
You're
as well.
just
So-
emphasizing, only because we'd already decided, right, that the town's going to put its support behind.
We have,
the
right, and I wanted to
sidewalk,
make
which
a
the
mention
sidewalk
about
is
that.
inclusive of the bike lane.
Yeah, we didn't mention anything
it's
about
one
the
and
bike,
the same.
bike lane in this letter that is being drafted, circulated by District 18 officials, and it would have all town council members' names on it and the mayor. It would include the president of the Holy Cross Parish Council. It would include the president of the Garrett Park Estates White Flint Park Citizens Association.
And then-
So it's also there's also a petition for the very same effort that's on change.org website, which is being circulated to all the surrounding communities here on the Strathmore corridor. And we have, as of this morning, we have 350 signatures. We're hoping for 1,000. But it is a civic community effort just to get this push going back against SHA. We have no mention of the bike lane.
And then can, maybe you and/or Andrea can, when I hear keep up the pressure, if you can turn that into, what are those tangible action steps? So, give us those list of names of who are the powers that be, and then tell us what we can do, both as council members. Is it a personal phone call to our state senator? Like, I don't know
Right.
we
Right.
may actually know the who's who if you could lay out what
Yes.
that pressure path is.
I'll be happy to do that, and also you'll get a copy of the letter once it's in final. And yes, Senator Wall-Striker is on there, Delegate Solomon is on
Because I
there.
think then, if you tell us those people, like, the letter and the signatures are one thing, but what I always find is that then the personal phone calls are what really
Right.
seem to, it's so easy nowadays
Yes.
to get signatures and send an email.
Right.
So oddly enough, I find the personal phone calls now become the thing that have weight because they're rare.
I think that is the next step. I agree. Talking with the legislative officials, we also all agreed that this was almost like a step one, reignited, resurrected from 2002, but to document for the record the written evidence of support from the town and the surrounding communities, because we didn't have all the surrounding communities in a written document before. So we can, whether it takes another 10 years, we hope we don't, it doesn't, but we can hold this up as a testament of, look, this is how many people have wanted this. So that's the start.
Great.
By the way, I know CACI doesn't want to lead, but I want to tell you something. In the state of Maryland, you underestimate the power that corporate towns have. That is, we could have all these associations all around us, and we would get no place without a core like the incorporated town of Garrett Park. It just carries muscle, and you're drawing everybody around you. By the way, also, talking about the bike lanes, which we hadn't talked about before, but it's all, again, part of the 2002 plan. It's there. They've avoided it 17 years. How this came to a head, by the way, is that I sent an email to State Highway Administration. I said, okay, once you get the pipes in, what is your plan about, I haven't seen the plans for sidewalks or planning, because we've had 4 large sycamore trees on State Highway property that we're talking, these are 36-inch trees. These are substantial markers. Even if you replace them with a bunch of 5- and 6-inch trees, you'll have nothing compared to what was there before with the sycamore. There's nothing on the plan that says the sycamores are coming down. Suddenly, the sycamores are all chopped up and left. There's nothing on their own plan. That is, if I was a builder bidding on this, it would not told me to take the trees down. And there's no remediation. There is no plans other than put sod down. They're going to leave a barren streetscape for us when they leave. I said, whoa, you're not going to do that. And that's when the fight started. You got to put the sidewalks in, you got to provide the planning. And that's when I went to Khaki, and she took up the banner, and all hell's broken loose.
Well, with
I think.
other-
We just have
other
to keep it going.
Thank you. I think if it's worth everyone's time, maybe to have a separate meeting on this at some future date, so we can really get a little bit more background, because I even have questions, but I don't want
I
to
understand.
delay today,
One
but
point, is there a possibility, you're not going to have a meeting in August. Is there any possibility when Byrne submits his proposal, this and the streetscape and this whole thing can be taken up in a work session? Is that possible without violating the sunshine law and all that kind of stuff?
no, it won't violate as long as we make it a public announcement, but
Okay.
give us some time to
Please
discuss that.
consider
There
that.
was a reason to
'Cause
have the
to us, this is a big,
August off, so people won't be around, so.
this is a big deal. It really is a big deal.
Yeah. No, I
So
appreciate that.
wanted you to consider the possibility of using the money you have in hand to put it towards the sidewalk situation, because that's a shift of money, whereas,
We're not shifting any money.
We can't.
well, I'm telling you, I'm laying it out there, there's a possibility, because.
I don't know
they
what
gotta-
money you're speaking to.
I'm speaking of.
I don't know what money you're speaking of.
I'm speaking of the grant money you have at hand.
That grant money is very specific to a specific purpose. We can't, yeah,
You should look into the possibility of shifting it over. That's all I'm
it
saying.
can't be shifted. It doesn't work quite like that. It just doesn't. Thank you, though. Thank you for the novel idea. Doesn't work like that in finance or procurement. Sorry. All right, is there anyone else? Is there another presentation by anybody? No? Okay, would you put that on the parking lot about a meeting, public meeting for discussion of Strathmore? Would you come up to the mic, Burns? Thank you.
It says presentation by residents. I'm not a resident of this town, but I'm a resident of a similar town, the People's Republic of Tacoma Park.
Okay,
And-
and state your name, full name, please.
Byrne Kelly, Tacoma Park, Maryland, registered landscape architect. And thank you for having me. I just wanted to let you know that the program that George Sr. has referred to is the Rainscapes program, Montgomery County Rainscapes, and they have pots of money for individual homeowners and for organizations. So there is a possibility that we can help the runoff onto the Holy Cross Church by attenuating it using the upstream properties, not with your money. And the other thing on that fee, it's just a 3-letter word with different letters than tax. We have a stormwater management fee we pay in Tacoma Park.
Okay. Thanks, Burns.
Right, now they're up to $7,500 per residential property. This is a very good program. I love this program. It's run by a landscape architect. And $20,000 per organization. So we're going to try and get that money for you.
There's also a grant program, and Andrea, we were just notified about it at MML, that it opened, I think, on the last day of the MML, the 26th, for public works funding, and I think it was through Chesapeake Bay, I'm not sure, but it was up to $75,000, and it closes in August.
That's part of the contract. Chesapeake Bay Trust grant.
Yeah, that might be it. Thank you, yeah. Thank you. All right. On to the next item. We have an action item, variance hearing for 4416 Cambria Avenue. Stephen is going to,
You can
Okay,
talk to this
thank you.
one. Should be one of the most straightforward variances we can deal with, because I think when the ordinance was modified, I don't remember how many years ago it was, there was a clause put in for a case sort of like this one. So what we have is a house on Cambria Avenue that is, it's on a relatively small lot for town, it's 6,829 square feet, the typical might be like a 10 or 11 or 12,000 square feet. And this house is it's proposed to tear down a deck in the backyard and replace it. I thought it was a screen porch, but now it's called an open porch, would be like an open porch you might have on a house like that one there. So the difference would be a deck in the backyard doesn't count towards your lot area coverage maximum, but any kind of a covered structure does. So if you're just following the basic calculation you would have to do, it's 18% for any kind of a main building in town, and with that size of a lot, the max would be 1,229 square feet, but what's proposed is 1,541 square feet, which is still not a very large thing, but this falls under, it technically requires a variance, but there's a clause in 402C 1.1.3 that talks about lots under 8,600 square feet, and when you go down further in that, there's a clause for lots that are smaller than that. They can have an exception up to 1,720 square feet or 25% of that lot's area, whichever is less. And in this case, both of the numbers that this proposed addition fall under that. So sort of by that calculation that's right in the ordinance, this would be acceptable. So I move to approve this variance.
Second?
Second.
Any discussion?
Well, I don't have any discussion because this is the first time I've seen this. And it would have been nice to have gotten it 2 or 3 days ago so that we could look at it as individuals and come up with questions, if any. And my concern is, you know, we've spent less than 5 minutes talking about something, and I don't argue with you that it doesn't violate any ordinances or anything like that. But I don't know that because I don't.
Well, we have the trust of the Land Use Committee and the chair sitting here, if George
not
Martin
to-
Jr. would like to say anything.
I have no
Okay.
problem with their assessment. I
Okay,
haven't had a chance to read it.
okay.
That's
We
that's
did
my-
get it, or at least, I know we've had some email issues, but I did get it by email, because I read it.
Yeah, I think it did come out, not a couple days in advance like you were saying, but I think it
Okay.
came out
Okay,
sooner than now, but
okay,
my apologies. I meant to send it on, I thought I did, but
yeah. I don't like voting on anything that I haven't looked at and understand and had a chance to ask questions about,
yeah.
so.
Is there anything I can help you with on this specific one?
Yeah, but we don't have time for it now. I mean,
Yeah.
Steve, again,
Well,
this
if
is
you
not
have
a
a
criticism.
specific
This is
question,
not a-
Hans, you can go ahead and ask. It's a
But
discussion
I haven't had a
time.
chance to read it. I don't, I can't form questions on a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12-page document. It's a statement of what I'd like to see happen in an ideal world, and if we can strive towards the ideal, I would love that. That's all.
In a nutshell, maybe if I could explain it a different way that may give you a little bit more comfort. There's normally a regular calculation that's done on a lot for any lot that has
I'm fully aware of
no
it.
need for a variance. So
Yep.
normally land use committee will review that and they'll do all the math and make sure that it's checked every which way and falls under that. So in this case here, there's a clause specifically saying if you don't meet
Not-
that, you go
right.
to consider a
So
variance,
set
but
aside
there is,
lot.
there is a
Right.
clause in there for under 8,600.
Right.
So this was calculated just to the specifics that are in that clause versus the ones that govern townwide.
Mhm.
So, would you like to vote on this now, or do you want to delay, or? We have a motion, we have a second. Do you want to now delay, or do you want to go ahead and vote?
The problem is if we have 3 votes on this council right now, and I abstain because of my misgivings, then it can't pass, and I don't want to be a stick in the mud on this. I just want to, I'd like next time to have more time with a document that I think is critical. That's all.
I think that's a great point, and I would say, like, let's note that in our minutes, because had I not read it,
Mhm.
I would be saying the same thing you
Yeah,
were. I think as part of our obligation and our
Yeah, right,
diligence, leave it to our national level politicians to vote on things they haven't read. We should at least role model reading what we vote on. Because I did read it, I want to give you the additional assurance.
Okay.
I'm super comfortable. I think we could vote on it and approve it with the sort of in our notes recognition to all of us that we all want that 72-hour window by email so that we can show up prepared. And I think if we commit to that, we just move forward.
I read it too, and I understood it, and even though I don't vote on this, I thought it was well done and well justified.
Yeah, it was a good report. There was actually one thing, I guess, when it came up earlier that George and I had discussed back and forth a little bit, and then he made a couple modifications just to make sure everything was in there that matched up exactly with that regulation. So it was looked at 3, 4, or 5 times back and forth.
I appreciate your time in that. Sure, please.
On May, to put you at ease, I'm sorry about.
George, yeah. Yeah.
We do try to get the draft.
No, I understand, and you usually do.
And,
Just state your name, please, because
George-
it has to
George
get...
Martin, 10702 Shelley Court, the middle level George, not the oldest, not the youngest, right in between. We do try to get the draft
Yeah, I
out.
know you do.
Part of it is, I use a template
Right.
for variance reports. And this one, I use the template, but it's pretty cut and dry because the exception is part of the ordinance.
The exception being the lot, definitely, what defines the lot, yeah.
What defines the case, and this is something that the homeowner and I discussed early on about where this was at. And just as a note, the Land Use Advisory Committee has never recommended in favor of a variance. In fact, it's our policy not to support a variance unless it's specifically within the letter of the ordinance. And so we've never done one. On one case, we issued no recommendation. That's because we were having a kind of a discussion. It was an
I recall
architectural
that.
issue. In this case, the ordinance actually speaks to this issue.
Right,
And that's something, in talking to the homeowner, in a normal course of events, we try to direct the homeowner to get the addition, the proposed work in line with the ordinance. In this case, given the lot and the way the ordinance speaks to it, we said, you know, there's an exception given here. You can meet that exception. So I have a large report when it could have actually been a one-page report which said, it's in the ordinance, this is acceptable. So just to, if it helps at all to give you some assurance, this is even comfortably within the ordinance. The homeowner could have done a substantially larger porch, so if that helps.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Thank you, George. That's great.
When it was written, the ordinance could have potentially had this kind of an exception right in the ordinance itself. It was
Right.
but within that variance paragraph,
Right.
which is what kicks it to it. And my guess is
Okay,
that
cool.
Harry, Gordon, and others, when they did that, they probably were thinking it would be good to just triple check these things
Yeah,
when they come through.
I can support that.
Yeah.
Okay. Why don't we vote?
Yep.
Okay? All in favor?
Aye.
All right.
Aye. And that's it. 3 ayes, unanimous. Thank you. Thank you, Stephen. Okay. All right, we are on to new business. Unless there's any objection, we're going to start with a policy for town groups funding requests, and that would be Councilmember Simons.
I'll try to be expeditious, but I think my goal here is that we can have ideally today's discussion and then have gotten all of the topics on the table to actually write and create the form, but I'm trying to do it in a way that makes each step, efficient. So let me begin with the end in mind. The goal is that the final outcome, I believe, will be a 2-page document. Page 1, a written explanation of how a town resident is to go about funding and what sort of funding the town does and does not support. So page 1 is several paragraphs, and then page 2 is a fill-in form, name, contact information, et cetera, et cetera. So this handout document that you have in front of you has a front and a back to it, essentially representing the 2 pages of the final document that we'll create. So the first page, I've also, in addition to our last discussion on this, with Andrea's help, I've reviewed this type of form from several other towns in the state of Maryland. So I think that it's a relatively straightforward thing, but it's important to get our policy, page 1, written properly so that it doesn't generate more questions. The document should answer every imaginable question so that for those who then do go to page 2 and decide to fill out the form, they understand what they're trying to do and how. So this is what I have here in bullet number 1, sort of an explanation or some of the things that will contain in the paragraphs. In section 2, I wanted us to talk about what's the flow, who's this going to, and section 3 is then like the final step, right? How does it get administered? I can obviously tell you that my thought is once we figure this out, and we're like, Andrea, right? So I see this becoming essentially administrative. I think some of the really material things that we need to discuss now are in section 2. So 2A and 2B, so that we know, like, because we could choose that this disbursement becomes mayor and town manager decision if we've already put discretionary funds in, or we could say the council wants to see every one of these. So I wanted us to discuss that. So, and then if you turn this over to the back, what I like to do before I create a form is decide everything that needs to be asked in the form, and then it's much easier at that point to, whether it's building a fillable PDF or we're creating a form stack that is just submitted with a click submit button on the website. To me, Andrea can figure out the back end of the most efficient way to administer that. So with that kind of preface in mind, I would ask, any comments about what we want to convey on page 1. I won't read this aloud to you, but this sort of like lays out what we would want to convey. And then you'll notice there's a couple things on the back page, like attest that the event is nonpartisan and non-confrontational. And we can wordsmith those things, but that would also be included in page 1, so someone doesn't bother filling out a form for some sort of political event. So I'm happy to have this discussion in any way that's most efficient with the council, Mayor, Andrea, and anybody that wants to chime in. Great, we'll get the form completed, submitted, and we'll...
Again, we're at a case where this is the first time I've seen this.
Right, I wasn't
And-
sure with our
and-
Open Meetings Act, what is the right protocol to sort of distribute to everybody, not to the, so I just wasn't sure of that protocol, that's why I didn't send it out.
So let me just quickly
Yeah, can you
address
just
that.
educate me on
Because
that?
I've gotten more educated from MML, because I asked a specific question for meeting efficiency.
Yeah.
Efficient meetings, and how to, have better preparation ahead of time without giving away, policy without having public inform. So the way now we can handle these kinds of things is, yes, you can distribute them. What there is not allowed is a back and forth discussion.
Right.
It would be more like, is there a specific question I can answer? Or do you have all the information you need in said document? It's more like that. It's not to belabor. So we would not have gotten into any discussion. It would have just said, is there anything more you need? Is there something that isn't worded correctly? Because the full discussion happens here.
So is the most efficient thing to do with this now, say, okay, we've distributed it, let's just take it as homework. If anybody has questions, call me individually, and ideally then I could potentially come to the September meeting with what I think is, if I gather individual feedback, I'd be willing to show up with a draft of both page 1 and page 2.
Sure.
Because I don't think there's going to be a tremendous amount. I think we got the topics on the table from the first go-round. Is that the best way to do that now, and we just agree to that?
I'm okay with that, with a small caveat that if there's questions coming to you that have to be, that verge on the realm of policy making and, real discussion, that has to happen here. So it's more like, hey, I think something is missing. I need I need a schematic,
Mm-hmm,
which I happen to draw for you.
yeah.
Fine, that's fine. How do we figure out the funding? Well, there's a quick answer, which is we've got some things going on in the budget already for this kind of stuff. But that's like a question, what you do is you write it down, okay? And then that has to come back to the council as a funding item. If we're gonna really get into some level of funding allocation, which I'd also like to tell you from MML's perspective, we don't get into the micromanagement of that, but anyway, I'm trying to
So if some-
help
yes.
you to stay away
Great,
from
so
getting
if
into
anybody
policy.
comes to me with, let's just say, like, a comment, or like, hey, it seems like you should ask for this, or what about this? Great.
You
It's like
can-
I could say, hey, thanks for
Yeah,
that.
you can put it in, and then it can also become more of a discussion that we can X out if it gets into policy.
Okay, so that's
Okay.
good for me, because it seems incredibly inefficient,
Yeah,
but I thought that that's what I was supposed to do, in the spirit of avoiding policy-making sort of offline.
you can, if somebody says, I think such and such should be in there, you put it in, and then people, as we do with minutes, you vote to actually take it out. It's not minutes that are typo, okay? It's not that kind of correction.
Okay, so then let's do that. I would say, great, let's just table it, put it on the agenda, let's make sure that Andrea, if you can.
Circulate it to everybody
Yeah,
else.
send it to our missing members. And so then how do we circulate it to the town?
So thank you, just great preface again. One of the things I've also learned, and I think we can do a better job as a town, is that to get more public engagement and public input, we should be distributing materials. So and I don't have a straightforward answer, because there's another way that this can be done, and it's another town does it this way, where they actually have a public working meeting on new topics, where either the residents bring a topic forward, and then we all talk about it. We don't have as much discipline to the time clock. And then that all gets finalized, and then we have another meeting where it's really the town council meeting. It's still open to the public, and that becomes a shorter discussion and a vote. So in this case, the question is, do we want to just have, if we distribute the materials to the public, to the residents, they either can send back comments and you incorporate them all, and we distribute it again to everybody. But at some point, if it's, again, stepping on policy,
But so if someone sends back
We
a
have to take it
comment,
out.
and I choose to sort of ignore it because I think it's not effective, then I'm essentially making a policy decision in that moment.
it
That's what
depends
I'm
if
not
it's a
supposed to
policy.
do.
It depends if it is policy.
Like,
No,
what if
no,
some-
no,
What if somebody
you-
says, well, I think you should have to submit your fingerprints along with this? And I think, well, that's ridiculous. I'm just going to say, thanks for the feedback and ignore them. Is that okay?
You can log it. I would say, if I were you, I would log it down, of course.
In my log of ridiculous feedback?
In your log of all comments and input.
Surplus feedback.
You can say what you accepted and what you didn't. I know we're getting into
No, but I
getting
want to
into
do,
detail,
I
but that's,
want to do it properly. So
I,
that's,
and I want to do it smartly.
okay, so then I would say, so that we can move on, here it is. I think if people do their homework, both council members and Andrea and anyone in town who's interested, send me that feedback. I'll follow the proper protocol, and I'll come to the September meeting.
Can I do one thing more?
Yes.
I would like to recommend that council and town office give you feedback first. Okay? That way, it's all in, and then you can distribute it to everybody, because we might already cover all that,
Great.
all right?
Sure.
That might be a little bit more efficient.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, you could get a swath of comments and inputs. Let's go this way first, cover it all, and then we send it out.
That would be the same as putting together a draft of this for
Yeah, it's
public by
almost-
September,
Right.
a draft beyond this.
Well,
It
before-
sounded like almost before, it was being discussed as almost like the council would just be kind of blended into the whole town, and the whole town would be making the policy, which I guess kind of
I
goes
think
against.
we have to make the policy, and we have to
Council makes
define, and I
policy.
think my sense is that you start with the definition of, do we believe this is a role for the town to play and for the town to fund? That's the big question, because again, I go back to the fact that we have major expenses coming up, this place being one of them, streets being one of them, continue to be one of them, stormwater management being one of them. And if we are to be wise stewards of our residents' tax payments, we should focus on on those needs and look at this as a possibility only if there were to be a surplus. I mean,
Okay, so-
I'm not saying that
No,
that's
no,
what to
that's
say,
fine.
but I think we need to have some kind of an overall philosophical statement that these steps then say, okay, if you believe that you have a case for funding, a request for funding that fits these criteria as articulated, then you can come to us and here are the things you should consider. It has to be nonpartisan, it shouldn't be the kind of thing that benefits only one or two people, it should benefit the majority of the people in town. We should think about this because, again, I don't want to spend taxpayers' money on
So you could then vote no
projects
on a
that
funding
benefit
request.
one or two people.
Yeah,
And it
Hans, I
may-
think you're jumping ahead
Okay,
because
I'm
we're not committing any money yet. In
No,
fact-
no,
I know, but this is the thing
I'm trying to
that,
articulate
I know,
a
but
point
this
of
is-
view and a philosophy.
right, but this is what Dan is actually trying to get down on paper.
Okay.
So, you know, yeah, you go through that with him. One of the
I'll be
things
happy to work on
we
it.
have is, we have a mid-year budget, you know, correction, we always do. We haven't even begun to talk about whether we even have the budget structure set correctly to align with the way the questioning might go in here. And
So-
I'm aware of that already just
Yeah,
by doing
that's what
this.
So that
this-
to me is like process.
Yeah,
Right.
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 So, you know, we're so far away from even,
So is that,
the
you think that's
process.
gonna be most effectively done as a retreat topic?
we could do this as a retreat topic. The retreat is September 21st, right? If you like. I mean,
We're going to be busy on that retreat.
yeah,
Maybe well, hopefully we could accomplish more in between now and then, but we could carve out a portion of it
yeah.
for that.
I still think
I-
getting any feedback to
Let-
Dan is a good idea.
Let's
Dan,
com-
you'll have a better working draft. And, you know, I think you're away in August, some parts. I know I am. So maybe we can, once we get that draft and everybody doesn't have any more changes, they may have questions, but we can then distribute it for public, you know,
Yeah, and the way that I think to then distribute it for any feedback is actually to have it in the form.
yeah,
To me,
okay,
this is what I
sure.
call like an ingredients
Yeah,
doc right now.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
No, that would be better.
So, well, I think
Better.
once it's a two-pager
Yeah,
in its structure,
yeah.
that's an easier way for
People
people to sort
understand
of
what they're
comment
looking
on
at.
it, right?
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Um,
And then if we need to hash out more, like, we have some other parts of the budget for FY '20 and FY '21, Andrea and I, that we want to discuss with you anyway during the retreat, which could come up for mid-year budget anyway. And it's not money as much as it's also structure. So, and things we learned at MML,
Okay,
so.
all right, good. I feel like I'm clear on the next steps. Andrea, too, maybe you and I can get together, talk about that final two-pager, like the ones that we've seen out there.
Sounds good.
Take this and frame it out.
Could we get copies of those other ones you've
Yeah.
researched, or
Send those around.
probably be helpful to see?
Great.
Well, thank you, Dan, for
Yeah,
working
I-
on
I'm
this, and
not- I'll make a
Andrea,
decision.
and for reaching out to the other municipalities. I'm really glad you did that. That's great.
And we'll get this added as an attachment for today's meeting also on the website.
Okay. Knowing that, we should write draft across the whole thing, yes. All right. Next, new business is accessory dwelling units for Councilmember Piskowski to talk about.
Just going to do a really brief overview of it. Meant to put together more of a report, but I just haven't had time, so I'm going to try to follow up with that. Basically, an accessory dwelling unit, it was difficult to build in this county for a while, to be able to either build an apartment within your house or even in the basement. That's been relaxed on, so it's a little bit simpler to do that. Up and through now, it's been, if you wanted to do something that was detached, like a house out, like a little cottage in your backyard, you needed a fairly large lot. It was like over 1 acre, which made it a little bit tougher down county where there's more transportation and everything else. But so County Council, I think it was Hans Bremer is the one that's spearheading this, is proposing to relax substantially any kind of red tape they see on accessory dwelling units. So they want to make it where pretty much all throughout the county you'd be able to build one. And they're studying, the staff at the Planning Commission is, they're studying what the maxes might be on the size of that, how it might be as a ratio of your house. So it's, I think it's currently set as it can't be more than 50% of the gross floor area of your main house. So if you have a 2,000 square foot house, the max you might be able to build is 1,000 square foot outside. But then I think they're even trying to cap that at 1,200. So even if you could build 1,600 by 4 million, you might be capped at 1,200. This is not the only county or jurisdiction that's looking at this. I believe DC has already passed it. I can't remember for sure if Arlington already has.
Some
Yeah.
of Virginia counties have.
Yeah, Loudon is looking at it. I think Fairfax may have already, they might have it up for adoption as well. So, and this is not a new topic. This has been around for years. So even when I was back in architecture school, probably when George Martin Middle, you probably learned from the same person I did about accessory dwelling units. It was a big new urbanism topic. And back then our big example was Capitol Hill. You had a lot of houses with garages where you could really turn that into an accessory dwelling that either another family member or a friend or somebody else could rent that out. So it seems it's extremely likely to be passed by our county. County council is, they have their political perspective, I think, which lends very much towards this kind of thing. I think they're very much for it. The county executive had a little bit of pushback, and I think there's some genuine potential impacts. So he was pointing out traffic could be increased, the schools could be overtaxed, infrastructure like storm sewers, like there's the fee or the tax, as everyone's calling it. On stormwater, they were already talking about waiving that for doing accessory dwelling, because you're trying to promote one thing while setting aside something else that normally gets promoted. So a lot of that's being worked out at this point. I found it a little bit interesting that the socialist organization around here was very unhappy with Elridge about being against that. There's a magazine, or Bethesda magazine article. But at any rate, I think it's very likely this is going to be passed. This town doesn't have a way of saying we won't allow them. All we can really do with is how they're done. We don't have zoning power, we have the setbacks power. So right now they're talking about the current side setback applying for the accessory dwelling unit. So for us it would be 10 feet. The thing I'm not totally clear on is whether they talk about the current side setback in general, because for us an accessory dwelling like a garage would be 5 feet. For a house it's 10 feet. I'm assuming it's the 10 feet, but it's something we need to find out. And also there's a minimum setback of, and I was curious how this might shake out. There's going to be a minimum setback of 12 feet off the back of the lot. So we've had some study over the years of looking at trying to bring houses forward off the back of the lot. And there was a great deal of concern about the Brown residents on Montrose. It's kind of not a case, but an accessory dwelling would sit back far on a lot, kind of like that. So that'd be something that has to be studied a little bit further for us as well. So that's basically where we're at. I think it's coming. I don't know how soon. I think it was first introduced by the county in January, and there's been a lot of staff reports since then. I think there was one in March, another one in April. I think there was a meeting in June. I think there's another one coming. So it's just something that we'll put a little bit more study about how it happens in Garrett Park, because I think even beyond the typical lot, an interesting thing that may come up if you have a lot of lots like this one where it's narrow in the front, right, 1800 style, it's 50 feet. I think this lot's even 45 feet, but it's pretty deep throughout the lot. If you have a house that's on a corner that maybe turns the other way, what would that really determine as far as an accessible dwelling? I mean, you could potentially have a house that faces the short end or even faces the front of the street. You could have an accessory dwelling unit what looks like it's off to the side and not in the back. So I think county council doesn't, or county's zoning work, it doesn't really seem to look into that, like how like, the dwelling unit can be placed on the lots. I'm not sure if they're really that concerned about it, but it's probably going to be something of great concern for us.
Thank you, Stephen. So where I'm going to go is if we do nothing, we are under the county code to implement the way they would have set this out for an ADU. So it'll be really up to the council and the town here to decide if we're going to even, if we want ADUs, how do we want to manage those, right?
Well, I'm not sure we'll have the choice of whether we want to allow them. It would be
Right,
more of,
I don't know that
but
either.
maybe that we might have a saying, and instead of 12 feet off the back, but maybe it has to be 20 feet, or maybe off the side it has to be 10 feet if we do find that it would be allowed 5. Maybe we're not that worried about 5, but,
So right
so,
now,
yeah.
if somebody wanted to come in and build, a Medi cottage or a grandma cottage, that's what some of these have been called,
Yeah, granny flats.
very nice. Do they have approval to go through and do that right now in our town? Is there?
I don't think you can in our town. It's tough to do it. It's a special, you have to get a variance for it.
Then you'd have to go up to the 81%, the 18%.
Yeah, that's another issue for us. I mean, I assume we're kind of know that answer. There was a lot of discussion about making that 18% and the 20% tax on a lot years ago.
But the way our codes are written today, I think it'd be very difficult to justify doing it. Now, quickly, an accessory building is necessarily, by definition, a discrete structure, and is it primarily a residential structure?
It would be for a dwelling, so it would be residential. And it doesn't have to be a discrete. What they're really trying to open up is make it, one, to make the attached one a little bit easier regulatory-wise to do, but also make it more easy to do a detached one as well. So the attached one, it could be, I think it's the same ratio where it has to be no more than 50% of what the main residence is, and it has to have its own separate entrance. And I think there was talk of making it where the entrance could be on the front, so it wouldn't look like a duplex. I'm not sure where that's tacking at this point. It's pretty rare to have a duplex around here. There are some over in Wheaton, but that was the one way to do it. And the other way, and there was that limit on that, but then I think the other clause was if you wanted to build a basement apartment, then there was no, if your basement was 1,800 square feet, you could just make 1,800 square feet. The basement wouldn't have the same regulation as something above ground. It wouldn't have necessarily the same cap as something that's in the yard. So there's different ways that something can be built. There are modular ones that can be built, brought off site. I've heard they're pretty expensive, or it could be stick built, but this is not a cheap thing. It could be hundreds of thousands of dollars to build one. Or you could build, say, like on the top of the garage. So it could be like Arthur Fonzarelli and kind of go up the steps and be up there. Interesting to see how it shakes out. It seems like the planning staff is really looking into a lot of the details, what other jurisdictions are doing, and trying to figure out where this could go astray if it's not carefully written.
Anybody else? Okay, thank you.
Daddy?
We're done.
Kick up to the mic.
The only reason we don't get that on tape unless you're speaking.
Steve, we were grasping with the same thing, Tacoma Park. One thing we did bring up, and Paul Freimer's brother lived on my street, and we are an example street because every house, we were once in Prince George's County, and every house has an accessory apartment in it. And actually, Mark Elrich made a rule that the apartments to be permitted in Montgomery County had to be 300 feet separated. That's the current rule.
Yeah, that would be taken out.
That was prohibitive, and now the emphasis is on affordable housing, retiring in place, people whose kids go away to college and they want to stay in their house, but they have rooms. So the idea is smart density, retired home, maintain your value of your property, and be able to keep your house. One thing that has come up, which is sort of a left field thing and happened out in Los Angeles, is tiny houses coming in on trailers. And they're temporary structures, but they put the same impervious conditions and the same demand on adequate public facilities, water, sewer, police, schools, all of those things. And that's sort of a left field thing that they haven't fully embraced and is being done. I know of two of them, one just outside of Tacoma, DC, and one in Tacoma Park. So just wanted to bring that up from my knowledge.
There's always a loophole.
I think the county staff has been looking a little bit at that issue, whether
Yeah.
required. And one of the things that was in there too is it can't be an Airbnb. It has to be
Right.
it has to be an owner occupied as well. So you could be a speculative developer saying want to build, a block full of 10 one and a halves.
And I believe the comment period is still open. This discussion is going on. Hans has written about it, and Mark and another, maybe not Florian, Navarro, and Mark might have replied. And then there was the Washington Post comment by a citizen, which was denigrated, was reacted to by council. So it's an ongoing issue right now, like you say. And I would advise you guys to tune in as well as you can, because it's important to everybody who
There's
has a
actually,
home or lives next to somebody who has a
There-
home.
thank you, Bruce. There's actually a work session on these ADUs tomorrow at 9:50, county council agenda. It's tomorrow, it's at 9:50.
It seems like they have enough issues where I'm guessing there's going to be a few more. I won't be able to make that. I won't be in Fort Lauderdale, but
It's a big one.
The action is tentatively scheduled for July 16th. Action. The work session is tomorrow at 9:50. All right, thank you. That's extremely relevant to our town, for sure. Anyways,
they'll just have to be balanced out with trying to preserve
yeah.
tree canopy and arboretum.
And retiring
Historic,
employees,
yeah.
there's a lot of good reasons, and then we're aware, Andrea and I, of some municipalities who, there's some very vocal dissent about it. I don't know if it's from the council, I'm just speaking about, residents who are in different towns that are in Maryland saying pretty vocally against it, for the reasons you've already mentioned. Okay, council retreat, this is other new business. Council retreat, I don't think I have anything to say, September 21st. That is a Saturday, if I recall, right? Saturday, September 21st, here in Town Hall at 9 a.m. It's open, it's an open meeting, it's not going to be closed. If we get into anything sensitive, we can close it. But that's how it's set, and I don't have anything to say about it. We'll be talking about some budget issues. We'll be talking about certain priorities, goals for the fiscal year coming, or we're in, but what we want to prioritize for the fiscal year. So, if anybody else wants to add anything, that'd be fine right now. Okay. All right. Moving on then to town updates, SRTS project. What can I tell you? We are 2 steps forward, 1 step back. We received a preliminary review from State Highway. I think it was Friday evening, if I remember right. I think it was Wednesday evening. So they just need to formalize some documents, meaning where we had gotten a request for a withdrawal from the lowest bidder, instead of having had received that by email, they want it on in letter format on company letterhead, for example. And it has to comply with COMAR, that's the Code of Maryland Regulation. And the part that we feel that we have relevance is where they would have to provide the meaning. The reason for the withdrawal, if you remember, was there was the statement made by the lowest bidder that they were already 100% committed. Their company capacity was already 100% committed through the end of November, and wouldn't be able to start this job until at the earliest would be December. And so although State Highway received that, we think if we can, if the lowest bidder will now just go back and put it on company letterhead and also cite, the contracts that they have committed to, where they're already 100% utilized, that we're hoping that will fill the bill. We do have a question in for State Highway, because we just don't want to go round and round. We want to be efficient about just getting this thing done. So they have not returned the call today by me or the civil engineer. So we have spoken with the lowest bidder at that point already today. So that's what's in the works.
So are you saying that we have not gotten SHA approval for the second lowest bidder yet?
No, we have not. That's right, Hans. And there's some question about, even in the bid determination, that whether we still have to rule out the lowest bidder. And we're not sure kind of what's going on here. So we have some very specific questions that we hope we can get answered tomorrow.
So at least another semester without sidewalks.
A semester?
Well, for the school, will start back up in late August.
Still hoping summer. But there's a process here under the Code of Maryland regulation. If the lowest, not the lowest, if a bidder desires to withdraw their bid after the bids have been opened, which is the case that we've had competitive sealed bids that were opened, that the request also has to be approved by the Office of the Attorney General. We don't know how long that takes. So that's just another question as well. Anyway, that's where we are. Okay. Councilmember Wagner, would you like to talk about the stormwater task force?
Yeah, we had a brief meeting attended by about 15 towns residents, more or less. With basically a presentation made by Jason Nazar, who is our town engineer, looking at who had submitted to the town 2 different solutions. One for the Rokeby Avenue and Kenilworth Lower Rokeby Avenue excess water in the heavy rain, and the same for the pipe that goes under Claremont and runs into Porcupine Woods. And essentially what we did at this meeting is Jason walked us through the 2 proposals and basically said, these are 2 conceptual ideas. The town feedback we can either merge some of the proposals, or we can think we have a lot of things. What came out of it was that there were some basic misunderstandings or miscalculations, or seeming miscalculations, as to the water that's running down into the valley between Montrose and Claremont, and where that water originates. And it turns out that based on the work that the State Highway Administration did to rebuild that road, that there are at least 5 or 6 catch basins on Strathmore which contribute to the flow of water into that valley and into Porcupine Woods, that all taxing the CSX drain that runs on the tracks. So we have our homework to do to figure out where the facts are and to make sure that we have the calculations are correct, and that whatever is built is substantial enough to carry the water that we need to be able to take away from backyards, streets, whatever else, or state highways. And secondarily, that we don't overwhelm what the pipes are under the tracks, which means that we have to include into the discussions CSX, which is going to be difficult. So anyway, that's where we stand. And we'll have meetings, we'll have meetings starting hopefully at the end of this month or the first week of next month, to start having discussions on the outstanding issues and figure out how to resolve them. And we will include, of course, working with the town engineer to make sure that we, as a group, agree to the calculation, the methodology, and the projection of flow. So.
Okay, thank you, Hans. We are jumping to communications with Councilmember Simons.
Sure, so I've gone through the minutes and the notes from the Communications Advisory Committee, so I think they seem to have made some good progress on coming to consensus on what they're thinking about. Just some highlights, so the focus, continued improvements to the website, maybe some more maps, some more detail, map of town trees, getting the videos of the meetings up on the website and access to those, be it through a YouTube link. Really getting the residents portal substantially improved, so a big part of that discussion, and potentially phasing out that GPML list, and instead getting the portal, serve that function in a more dynamic way to get us, and I think that will lead the communication to be a lot more contemporary, the way people are used to. There'll be some improvements for the town directory. The committee decided to recommend against any sort of digital board or large screen in the post office for a variety of reasons, but it seemed like their conclusion was it didn't really fit physically and it didn't really fit aesthetically. I don't necessarily have a dog in that fight. I think the town committee should be the ones to set that direction. And then probably the most important conclusion that the committee had was that they'd like to use the funding that they get to have an intern to do the work that they recommend. Because I think that's always one of the questions: where does the work go? And I can't be everybody who looks at Andrea like I do when there's work to be done. And so the thought of getting an intern to clean up that list, work on that residence portal. I think one of the things that's missing, but sort of implied from the group that I'll communicate back is I still think at some point there needs to be some sort of like old school door-to-door campaign. I have a slight hunch that from a communication standpoint, there's people in the know in town, and then there's this assumption that that group in the know represents everybody else. And I think I don't know the total number of bugles that you can get picked up.
300. I think it was 300 that were made this past month. And
300 get made and 300 get picked up.
yeah, well, no, I would say 300 get made, I think 20, maybe under 20 now get mailed out. People who have subscriptions, I think that's been cut in half now, though. Remember that we have online, ebook, so, and then there's some that are left over intentionally in the office for new residents who come to town, so that we can give them copies of the past couple of bugles as a way to orient them to.
So I think what I would say to the committee is whatever we do to streamline and improve the communication, we still have to tell everybody in town that we have done that in order to get that as sort of forced participation at least first. Ideally, it's sort of a forced opt-in, and then residents can choose to opt out if they want.
I think that's a good way to go, yeah. And to that point, Dan, if I could, I don't know if you're done.
Yep.
Okay. I wanted to just reemphasize to everybody here that all council members, all chairs of committees, and all members of committees and groups have automatic posting rights to the GPML now. There's about 535 email users, members on GPML.
So I think if the committee is able to, get an intern that they can compensate and task with this, because the updating of the directory, which is another one of the recommendations, with maybe some additional detail about residents, to use it as a resource so people can understand, other people's expertise and who's really here. Sounds like a good idea, but I think it's clear that they're saying, great, we can distill these ideas down to stuff we've done, and then we need someone who can say, great, spend X hours and now make it happen and do this.
I mean, I think to me, one of the questions still remains about, we have the Garrett Park Neighbors List, which does a really great job reaching way out beyond the borders of our town residents for, you know, for tips, for ideas, for selling and, you know, hiring. I mean, it really does serve a good purpose because of that bandwidth, because it goes that far out. And I don't know if residents would use a forum for that, a town forum, because I don't know if you've heard from the communications team about this, but would we be opening the Garrett Park Town Forum to everybody, or is that specifically just for residents? Right now, it's specific to just residents, and it really plays off the GPML list. And whoever registers in the portal, so that's kind of where it started, but.
Well, and I think digital may be the way to do that, is if somebody wants just town communications, you sort of put the check mark on one thing. Potentially, you could say, you could hit another checkbox and say, add it out to go onto that broader list.
Yeah.
So there could be a way to leverage that
Right.
value of that broader list,
Right.
but still have, it's like when you post on Facebook, right? You can do it to like close friends,
Yeah.
or you can do it to everybody. And maybe we leverage that non-town, everybody broader list. That might, be a way to do that. So I can propose that back to the.
And one of the things I noticed was that the number of residents who have opted to receive email notifications off the website is only about 130. So, you know, somehow marrying up this GPML with the town website, one way or the other, would work. Right now, the dominant number is on the GPML side, which is why we're using it and why I've opened it up for automatic posting. It would be more efficient not to have to do individual postings to both sites, so maybe feeding one to the other or just whatever, but somehow to
And I wonder,
make that better, efficient.
one of my thoughts too is, from the council perspective, you know, Andrew, if you have a list of additional work that you could move forward more quickly, if you had additional resource, you know, rather than, you know, what you could say to us is, yeah, if I have an intern, here's what I could do, X, Y, and Z faster, and then we could also say to the Communications Advisory Committee, okay, you know, you have some stuff you'd like to get done, which really, in my mind, is town work to get done. So you may have a larger list, and then you have one intern or, you know, temporary resource that you're managing, and we could say, here's the list that's going to get done. So.
Yeah, and Kathy and I have talked about it a little bit, but I've had an intern job description for a few months now. I just haven't had a chance to do anything with it. So we needed to hire the archivist, get the budget, get the road paving and all that. So definitely something to talk more about.
Okay.
Yeah.
Andrea is also exploring veterans. There's an association that links veterans as interns who are in, you know, school programs.
Yeah, fellowships. So for veterans that are looking for what they're going to do when they're out of the military and what their career might be, for those that are interested in local government, and they're trying to get a word other than vetted. There's a process before they would be able to be eligible to do one of these programs in local governments, and they're fellows and they're free to the community. And it's for, you know, limited duration time period, but at the same time, these are folks that are interested in getting involved in local government. There's no cost to us. So I sent an email to find out more about that program too.
I mean, my hunch is, as a council, I can say what I would support. My hunch is, you know, you have these volunteer positions in town, right, on the council and the mayor and these committee members. It seems sensible to allocate some funds to pay someone to do some work, to actually get some stuff done instead of 30 days at a time. To say like, hey, here's a list, here's a chunk of hours, and, you know, move something forward more quickly. I would certainly be they were allocating some funds to, pay someone to knock some stuff out.
Appreciate you doing that. Yeah. Things we could talk about at the retreat if we have to. Or want to.
That's all I have.
All right, great. Thank you, Dan. Stephen, do you want to talk about anything on historic preservation? I'm sorry, Councilmember Piscassi.
Yeah, just one slight thing with it. Still working towards the study for the fall to go on the next steps for planning. One thing I was thinking about is I guess the town meeting staff is looking into or has bought scaffold already, and just some of that is with.
No, yeah, unfortunately, it did not, it was just before the end of the fiscal year, so we haven't bought it yet. It'll be
You
in the-
could buy it in the 2020s.
Yeah, no, certainly.
It's something
Yeah,
they're
there's no-
looking into, which
Yep.
makes sense for
Yes.
taking care of Penn Place and for taking care of this building. But one thing is barely see out of that now, it looks like the vines are kind of taking over. So I don't know if they are comfortable with making the judgment on what can and should be cut back and cut down, or if we should try to find a landscape architect to kind of do an analysis of kind of what is really meaningful vegetation and what is overgrown and what should be trimmed back. I asked one resident in town whose mother is a landscape architect, and looked at her to get a proposal, and we could get some others to see if it's necessary. It may not cost that much, but it might be a way to do it. Just want to throw that thought out to everyone.
Do you see that as separate from the David Gregg pruning services or even Phil Normandy or?
If one of them feels comfortable with, I mean, Phil Normandy normally deals with trees. I don't know if he deals with shrubs and things like that as much. So it wouldn't necessarily be about trees, but like all those vines and everything else. That'd be fine.
We should get
David Gregg
Jane,
probably was.
yeah, Jane might
Yeah,
want to
try out some other
look into
resources.
that, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Nothing, we're not gonna talk about archives, or, right? Do you have, or, you're taking traffic in parking lot, so.
I have a traffic comment, I know we should up, but, just with this thing that, this corner right here, do we get the, thank you. Can we just like put up the no parking sign, like, tomorrow? Like, what is our process for that?
Okay, so we order the signs from the sign company, and then they send a quote back to us, and then I think in some cases we see, so I got the quote back today,
Okay.
from the formal quote back today. And then George, town meeting staff, George Miller had referenced that there may be some sort of, like drawing or spec or something that we'd be looking at, but that didn't come with the quote, so I don't know if it's just the quote for this, because they're pretty straightforward in terms of what we're asking for. So I think the order will probably get made pretty quickly, and then there will be some discussion for some places, there's some nuance, obviously, in terms of where the sign goes, and if there's striping that accompanies that sign. I'm thinking in particular around the Wells Park area, there's a lot of work that's been done by Dick Pratt and Chuck Berry and some others, and Phil, to really get that kind of nailed down. So I think there'll be some further discussion there. This one I think is really straightforward, Kenilworth and Strathmore, so I think probably as soon as that sign comes in, that can go up.
Oh, great, okay, so there's no other bureaucratic process to go through, we could do that, you order it, put it on,
It's been
ideally,
asked.
I would say, paint that curb yellow.
Yeah, that's all in, that's exactly what I'm talking about. So some of them have more of that kind of stuff that goes along with it. Some of it's literally just installing a sign. It just depends on each of the locations. So there's around the pool around Wells Park, on Weymouth and Kenilworth and Strathmore, I think are the 4 locations. I may be missing one off the top of my head, but.
The Rokeby curve from Penn Place.
Okay, and if any of those other spots like get complicated in here, then like, let's at least just do this
Yeah.
one.
Right, yeah.
You know what I mean, if
Yeah.
that can be simple.
Right.
Yeah,
Just-
that has been asked a few times now, so you're right on.
I'm thinking about running out there myself with some yellow paint, I could get that done.
Yeah.
Just don't arrest me for vandalism.
This morning, it's 8 o'clock.
I just wonder if we need the yellow paint, because it's been pretty effective on, is it Raleigh that goes around, come out of the pool, we put signs there, but did not
it was considered to kind of like stripe a bunch of hatch pattern yellow paint around that side of the road, and we decided, why don't we just put up signs and see what happens? I don't think anybody really parks there. So I'd wonder if we'd be less visually a attraction if we just put up signs. It seems like those are effective, versus painting a curb is kind of indicative of a fire lane. So in front of the pool, it's a fire lane. In front of Penn Place, it's a fire lane for a fire truck, and this wouldn't be a fire lane.
So
we would
even-
try it and see if it works. If it doesn't, then
There's painted yellow curb right along here.
it's a public building.
No, but it extends to the end of the road. I mean, it's, there are sections on
Yeah.
this west side of Kenilworth, and then all along the east side that are
Mhm.
painted.
Yeah, we did paint it down there, I guess, last year, because one resident was concerned about people park there all the time for school events and
Yeah.
that. But I
One
guess-
consideration with the yellow paint too is that it does eventually come off and then it needs to be repainted, so it's just sort of one more thing.
And
to
then
make
if
staff
we're
to-
starting with the sign and see if that gets it
Yeah,
done,
yeah.
that's fine as well.
And some of the yellow on the curb across from the swimming pool. At
Facing south.
Ed's, your side facing the pool, I mean, some of that's already worn off, and I've been told that people park there anyway.
Every swimming meet, somebody parks there,
Yeah.
at least one.
Yeah, so we'll get on that. Andrea assures me that the signs are getting ordered, so.
In process.
Town staff is just putting that in themselves, or?
Yes.
I want to also just say special thanks to Dick, who is here this evening, for working diligently with Chuck Berry on the mapping and the explanations, interpretations of the law, the code, and so forth, of the signage. Put a lot of time into it. Thank you, Dick. Okay. Councilmember Wagner, do you have anything to say about this traffic?
Only that, yet again, I've been told by SHA that they've done 2 surveys, including one on the weekend. They wouldn't tell me when they would do them, so I didn't get a chance to go out there and say, look, I want to see how you do this. And I haven't heard nothing more of it. So at some point, we're supposed to get findings of what the traffic count was on a weekend count. These are people crossing Strathmore at Keswick in either direction, on the way to the pool or coming from the pool, largely children. And so that's pending. I had an arrangement to, I invited Jeff Waldstreicher's office to come and watch it with me. And Jeff was supposed to come on Thursday of last week. Thursday of last week, and couldn't make it. No, it was Friday. It was Wednesday of last week. Couldn't make it. He had to cancel. I'm now supposed to see him at 9:30 tomorrow morning there, so we'll see whether he can make it. And basically, I just want him to see what I see, which is we've got a problem there, and we need to figure out a way to solve it. And if the State Highway Administration can't do it, maybe they need some help. So that's where it stands.
All right, thank you, Hans. Andrea?
Let's see, not too much different from the monthly written report that was submitted. The June revenues, operations, and capital budgets are at expected levels. Total revenues and expenses are within projections. Also wanted to add, this is a draft. We're still getting invoices in for expenses that took place in June. So this will change before the year end close. So this is not the final June report. There's one town building permit that was issued to add a screen porch at 11020 Rokeby with the revised June 10th site location and plan. As far as town maintenance, we have a lot still that's been going on. FY19 road repaving project is nearly complete. The striping is done 30 days after the repaving happens. That we should be coming up on that. My guess is sometime this week or next week. We may do a change order for some additional curbing work. The ongoing maintenance of the arboretum continues, and trees are diseased or dead trees are getting removed. We're also elevating trees along certain blocks. We started with the July 4th parade route. We'll move to routes next where there are school buses or tall trucks that tend to drive. Let's see. The town's insurance was renewed for FY20, so this is our insurance through Legit, the local government insurance trust. So this is things like property insurance, general liability, public official liability, auto, et cetera. I just wanted to formally thank the Arboretum Committee and the town's consulting arborist, Phil Normandy, for all the hard work and collaboration on the comprehensive arboretum plan and the tree inventory. That work is still ongoing, it's behind the scenes. They've been doing a lot of work and there's a lot that's been happening with it, so it's not been delayed necessarily, it's just that there's a lot to get through. So that'll be, I think you all appreciate when they're ready to come forward with that. In terms of Maryland Municipal League, nothing to add, just echoing what Khaki said, that it was a great event. There was lots of educational sessions, but then also great networking. I had an opportunity to attend a lunch with the clerks, and then I had an opportunity to attend a lunch with the managers, so it was nice to get some face time with both of those groups of folks as well. So thanks for the opportunity to be able to do that. And that's it for me.
If there isn't any other discussion or question,
How about a comment?
or a comment?
It looks to me, in my reading of this, that we are over by almost, well, 178,000 in revenue. And we're under by 178,000 in spending. No, I'm sorry, 91,000 in spending. So that's a swing of about $270,000. And I just want to make sure that when we meet for our retreat, we figure out what the right spend for those dollars is, because we've got some major expenditures coming up, and that's a nice pot of money to have to weigh.
I'll be happy to tell you what MML says we should do with surplus.
And just again, pointing out that number will change. It will decrease. Yeah.
But the basic
Right.
number is
We're still gonna have-
37,000, that's a
Yes.
big number,
Yes.
that's a windfall. Maybe not a windfall, part of it is a windfall because the revenue is greater than we anticipated, but the underage in budget expenditures, obviously smart management, so. That's all.
Yeah, there's your surplus on page 2, actually. It shows you right there. It shows you, on the June column, it says net difference from revenue is 670. And then after the transfers and so forth, it shows you 371. Of course, as Andrea says, we're still a tiny percentage with that.
Oh, yeah, I wasn't aware of that, but it's a nice chunk to have to consider how to use.
To leave all what they and analysis to do. Okay, meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everybody. 9:05.